Azure Well-Architected Framework. I will be talking about one of the pillars of Azure Well-Architected Framework, which is the cost optimization. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Something is okay. First of all, I want to thank Paul. I want to thank DSI, great company. I know them for, I think, around 15 years. I know them. Very good company. And I know Toronto SQL Pass. So Toronto SQL Pass, something interesting. It used to be called, in Toronto, it used to be called T-SQL, and I think Toronto Pass took over. So it was Toronto SQL, and everyone thought this is transactional SQL, but the group was called T-SQL, and I think the guy was his name was Joe Michael, who started it 15, 16 years ago. But it's not Toronto Pass, that's a different team, but they kind of blended in and went with Toronto Pass because they were a bigger company. And anyway, I just want to thank you guys for attending and putting this your valuable time here today. A little bit about me. I'm a data architect. I've been working in the data field for over 30 years. I'm very hands-on. I do lots of strange designs. I do lots of event grid, streaming analytics, lots of extreme dynamic ETLs like SSIS PowerShell, combination of SSIS PowerShell, multiple languages as in SSIS to extract, do lots of Azure Data Factory for 2,000 input and outputs. And by the way, we do this with 1 or 2 pipelines, not thousands of pipelines. So we create tools. Lots of IoT I've done. I've worked for big Scotiabanks. Scotiabank credit card that you swipe, it goes through a database, and that database, I designed it. Minimum 17 million records go through that database per day. This is credit card and debit cards. And up to 17 million record per hour, depends on the days and events. So I've done lots of good stuff when it comes to data. I work with someone called Deepak Kushik. He's a security guy, so we work very close together, specifically on the data and IoT. We've been giving lots of presentations and events in Saskatoon. I have to go to Saskatoon, you have to come to Toronto. So we've done lots of things on these kind of fields with Deepak. Today's agenda, I didn't change anything. I just renamed one of them. So I just renamed it to extracting service inventory. I just moved it up. So again, I will be only focusing on one item, which is one of the pillars, of the Azure Well-Architected Framework, which is the cost optimization. What I generally do, I try to, of course, we have to explain what the Azure Architected Framework is, but what I always do in my presentation, I try to bring the real experience that I had with my client. So to do that, I'm going to explain what the client had, and then I'm going to say what Microsoft has, or basically how Microsoft deals with it and how I dealt with it. And at the end, I'm going to give you a real scenario that I went through with a client. So this is the scenario. Let's start with the story first, that what I had in hand and what happens in every company. So this client had 1,300 services in one tenant, in one environment, and they were paying around $1 million per year to Microsoft. They knew they had lots of issues. They knew they needed to save something somewhere. How much, they really didn't know, and they didn't have the time to begin with. So they had lots of clients in all over the world, and they wanted to find ways to save money for themselves because the client was paying for this, and they didn't want to, they didn't want the clients to pay that much. On the other hand, they were saving the money. So the problems with these kind of scenarios is, as a contractor, I'm not allowed to go to these environments. They don't give me access. I don't have the luxury to install or deploy what I want within the tenant environment. Just imagine 13,000 services, and this new guy comes in, he wants to do something. So lots of teams are protective. They want to push back because something goes wrong, everyone's in trouble. So that's where you have to find a way to blend into the system and find a way to show the client that how much money you can save. If you're going to save something around $50,000 or 5% of their expensive, that's a very good number. If you cannot do that, that is not a good number. If you want to save them peanuts or they have 2 or 3 services, it will be just a good practice for you to learn, but it will not be a good contract, okay? And by the way, in general, you only have 1 day to provide a report and convince them that, hey, in the future, they will give you a contract and let you into the system. So this is what I did. This is what Microsoft did. So let's go back, like check on-prem what we were doing. So within an on-prem environment, we had, we had softwares, and these softwares needed to move to the cloud. So Microsoft couldn't just, say, hey, just move to the cloud, everything's going to happen. So they came up with a concept which is called Azure Well-Architected Framework, which basically enables cloud adaptation success. It has 5 main pillars, which I will explain soon in the next. And it focuses on the way to design, build, and basically deploy, and lots of other things that we have been doing in the past 10, 20 years in an on-prem environment. Azure Well-Architected Framework has 5 pillars. So the cost optimization, which will be the one that we will be focusing on today, operation excellence, performance efficiency, reliability, and security. Someone's microphone is on. Hello? Hello, can someone's microphone is on. Okay, better. So in the past, we had teams like security, like the DBAs, the developers. We had all of these people working, but there were some issues and problems that they had. Was they were, in general, they were never talking to each other. What I mean talking, it means the security team, when they set up the security, they just went, they just vanished. They were gone for good, almost. They never did reevaluation. The teams did not collaborate that much, okay? And most important thing, these environments, these services, let's say SQL Server versus a web page versus a shared folder. Each team had a responsibility on the services that they had. They never talked to each other. So Microsoft said, hey, wait a minute. If they come to the cloud, how could I make them talk to each other and collaborate and get close to each other? So they came, they came up with a service called Azure Advisor. So the Azure Advisors goes through all of these 5 pillars and evaluates your current tenant or your current services within the cloud. It goes under the skin of your services, reads their log, reads their tagging, all of the activities that they have, and it will score your environment. Here's a good example. As you can see on the left side, we have cost, operation, performance, you can see the same thing here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you got the 5 pillars. So if you remember, one of the things I said is these teams, they never talk to each other and they never reevaluate their work. So guess what? This service, the Azure Advisor, does that for you. I'll give you one example. So let's say the security team comes, they check the security, they check an IP, and the IP is local, and they leave. And they say, hey, it's valid, it's not a global IP, they're gone for good. But if you rerun this service, which is the Azure Advisor, let's say 3 months down the road, it will capture and say, hey, wait a minute, you have a global IP. Is that correct or not? This is a good example when it comes to the cloud technology. Another thing is, let's say you have a SQL Server and your SQL Server is not getting a backup. It will go and find out and tell you, hey, we're suggesting to give you, it gives you a recommendation, which we will see today, okay? There are some principles that you have to follow. So when it comes to cost optimization, so one of the things is, are you using the right resources? Make sure you're using the right resources. the right sizes. When you might say resources, again, we'll go through an example today and I'll show it to you. The amount of how you're using your consumption and how you're paying it. Is it pay as you go? Is it a, what kind of model is it? Do you have a licensing for it or not, which I will show in my next slide. So you must always basically measure all these pillars at each time. Some of the pillars you have to measure every day. For example, cost. You want to make sure you're not overspending. But things like security. Do you need to check security? Well, once you set it up, you may need to check it once a week. Again, we will go through a scenario today, and I will show you how I do a checking and basically how I use the Azure Advisor for this. Some other tips is one thing I always say, make sure you memorize how much your basically cost, your services cost. A good example I always say is, how much does an Azure Data Factory cost? And lots of people, they'll tell me $200. I'm like, okay, this is $200 where? Is it for dev? Is it UAT? Is it production? So these are the things you have to understand. So write down your optimization list. You have to list these down, because once you go from one client to another client, they're kind of, the checklist is almost the same. You might say, how does Microsoft does it? Microsoft does the same thing. They have kind of a checklist that they go through, and basically they evaluate and give you a recommendation for the pillars that you have selected, which will be my next slide. Oh, and one thing I forgot is the benefit of licensing. So in general, as far as I have seen and heard, there's 3 groups, or maybe 4 in some cases. One is the pay-as-you-go. One is reserve instances. So basically, you're kind of booking in advance for 3 years, and you're paying kind of in advance for 3 years. And there's another one which I recently worked with, which was very strange, a non-profit organization. So they get an extra discount. So make sure when you're doing cost optimization, you know which categories you fall in. And by the way, which group or which team is working on that. Okay, for example, the dev team versus the production. So Microsoft has something called Azure Well-Architected Framework Review. Basically, it goes under the skin of your environment, and it will read the logs, read the tags, read lots of things behind the scene, and it will evaluate your environment, and it will give you a score. It will tell you what score it is. So in this case, if you can see on the screen, we've got the 5 pillars. I only choose the cost optimization. So this is the end result. I will show you how to get here, okay? And we'll do a demo, basically. This is the cost optimization. So I'm only focusing on one of them. And I went through basically the checklist, and it gave me this score. So the score is kind of critical or low. But I have to understand, is this in a dev or in production or UAT? You can use this for any other pillars, but whatever you're doing, please pick one pillar, go all the way down, learn, make sure you understand it. Everyone's has a specialty or focus on something better than the other thing. So a good example is my friend Deepak. He focuses on security, so he knows the options in security way better than me. But cost optimization is something else that we kind of both focus on. So how did I get here? By the way, the day before, last night I found out Microsoft changed all of the links, so I put the new links here, and I was just like, thank goodness I checked it. So how do we get here? How do we get this result? Let's go through a scenario. Let's see the screen as a screenshot, and then I'll show it to you how I did it, okay? So this is what happens. I go on Google for Azure Well-Architected Framework, and once you do that, you get to a part of the page. There's this link. You click on it, and it brings you to another page. And this page will basically tell you what are the pillars that you want to select. And in this case, we're going to select cost optimization. And the cost optimization has a series of groups of what you need to focus on. And each group has a kind of a checklist that you can go and basically go through. And by the way, you can run this before production. You can run this, sorry, before you start. You can run this while you're doing development, and you can run this while you're doing production. If it's production, you should constantly run this, I don't know, once a week at least for all of your services. So here's a good example. How do you optimize the design of this workload? So it's up here. It's got a checklist, and you kind of check the lists that you are working on. So let's pick a good example. Says data is being transferred between regions. So if I do not check this, and finally I run all of this, it will ask me, it will go through my services and see, oh, I'm using multiple regions. And it will alert me. It will give me and say, hey, you told me that you do not transfer data between multiple regions. But I went through the services and I found your services are in multiple regions. Go and fix it. So it will give you a recommendation. Again, I will show it to you after this, okay? So let's go through one scenario, very simple. Oops, sorry, not this one. So as I had said, you have to search for Microsoft Azure Well-Architected Framework. So when you scroll down, you see this option. This is the first thing. Is Azure Well-Architected Review. I'm not going to click on it. I've clicked on it in advance. So these are the list that you saw in my screenshot. You can click on them. So this is the list of the security that I had set. So if I click on something else, you see a different checklist. So wherever I check, it's got to check different checklists, and you click next. I will go through it. I have this kind of in the memory so you can see what I have. And then finally you go next, next, next. So once you go through all of this checklist, the result is this. The results give you a recommendation, and it basically scores what you have selected. And of course, you can log into your environment. It goes and extracts all the logs and checks and evaluates what you have and basically scores it. So in this scenario, in this case, the scoring is 16 out of 100, and it is critical. And I only picked cost optimization. You'll see the word recommendation. So what is a recommendation? You have to scroll down, and you see this is the list of the recommendation that will improve my environment. So let's just go through a couple of them. So one of them is, it says, utilize the pay-as-you-go consumption model where relevant. So this is one of the recommendation that is giving me. There's another one here. It says, use a developer SKU for dev test and purposes. So this is something it is suggesting. What is this? I'm going to explain you in one of my slides later on. As you can see up here, I only selected the cost optimization. But if you scroll down, you will see some other places. There are other more recommendation for performance. So that it will find the relation between your cost optimization and the other pillars. If you remember, we talked about this, that on an on-prem environment, these teams do not talk to each other. The team does not go and evaluate someone else's work. A good example is security. Security sets up, tells the DBA, hey, whenever you're getting a backup, do an encryption backup. Guess what? The DBA forgets it, doesn't do it. Well, this type of tool captures it and says a report from a security and say, hey, the backups are not encrypted. Is it okay or not? Or you're not using a blob storage. It's not being used. It's not being utilized. It gives you recommendation of what to do for those services. So it will find a relation between the teams that are responsible for each pillars. Okay. So let's go through one scenario. I'm just going to show you how I did it. So I'm just going to right click. I'm going to keep this in memory. I don't want to lose them. So I'm going to give my assessment a name because I can reassess again and again. So every week it will basically use this and it will keep the log of my work of the assessment through, let's say I do this once a week, every week. I'm going to select security. I'm going to say next. If you see, once you select this, if I select more, you see there's more coming up. I say next. And then I'm going to go through the checklist one by one. If you see this is the same as this here. So I'm just going to pick some few things, some random. So the problem with this is some of them are not clear. I do not understand what they are. And the problem is right now, this tool is very good, but it's not mature enough. I'll give you an example. Let's just pick one, something like secure plan for this workload was deployed and is maintained. Okay, what does that mean? I really don't know what that means. I have to bring my mouse here and I see basically, and I have to read the tooltip. I cannot find the description of each line and the tooltip. Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
You're off for a while, just for a second, not a while, for a second. You're there, not there.
Someone was saying that they're recording something. Recording has started, something like that. Anyway, let's just move on. So let me just repeat. So the problem with this is the tool, the advisor here is the reviewer, not the advisor, is not mature enough. When I mean it's not mature enough, it's here. I don't know the meaning of this. I really don't know what it is. So I have to bring the mouse here and basically see and try to figure out what that means versus the tooltip. So these are the hard things that I have to go through to understand one by one. So that's why I'd say, hey, whenever you're using the review, well-architected review, go through them one by one. Just pick, for example, security, and go through all the options, try to understand it, learn them. Some of them, they're very complicated. I don't even know what they are. And I do lots of research and I can't find them, to be honest. There will be lots of other features in it. So you like infrastructures, you need to have a knowledge of infrastructure security in almost everything. So don't pick all of them at the same time. That's what I'm trying to say. So just to skip all of these, I'm just going to go right to the end, and let's assume I do this and this, and then finally this and this. It gives me a good scoring, and I only focus on security, and it gave me 23 recommendation. And let's just pick one by random. It says define security requirement for the workload. If I click here, it gives me what are the things I could do. Apply Azure policy, basically it's one of the recommendations that it's giving me for my tenant environment. So this is how you can basically use Azure Review. Now, one of the things that you could do is log into your environment and do this in the beginning. So which I'm not going to do here. It's not, we don't have time for it, but you can sign in and basically select your environment, select the resource group, and focus on a specific resource group. So that's another thing you can do, which I did not do, and I'm not doing during this presentation. Okay. So now we kind of know how Microsoft does it, but the thing is that the only solution? Is that the only way? Is that the only tool, basically? Well, so we said we've got Azure Advisor. So there's other tools out there as well. So there's one of them which is very interesting. It's called Azure Cost Management Tool. Basically, it's a Power BI tool. It's a Power BI that, again, goes under the skin of your tenant environment, extract all the costs, and basically gives you a nice report on how much your services are spending, basically the details of every single cost, Is it CPU consumption and lots of other things? So that's a tool that you should basically, I think it needs a full day to go through that tool. There's other ways to do it. API calls, I do it through Postman. So there's API calls. You might say, why would someone use an API call? A good example is I only focus on SQL Server, so I don't need to boil the ocean and focus on other services. So you can only focus on one service and find the APIs for it and extract the data for that service only. There, let's go. I just want to show you how they look. So let's go back to the here. So Azure Cost Management and Billing. This is one of them. So it gives you kind of a reports. And if you're using the Power BI, there's a connection management. And by the way, they will give you the Power BI reports as well. So you can find this in, while you're connecting, you can connect to your tenant, and basically it will extract all the cost management information. The API, the API, this is another good example that I just explained. So you can basically get the API, make sure you just change options like this, enrollment number, and basically you have to connect to, and I use Postman to do this. And it gives you a result like this. So it tells me about my, for example, my virtual machine, and the amount of hours being used, and the tier. And in this case, I don't see the tier, the amount of cost. That's a different API, sorry. That's a different API. And the amount of cost and usage that it's going through, okay? Now, there's two other ways to do it as well, is go through a third party or create your own list. So now up to this point, we know what Microsoft does, but the problem with some of these approaches, for example, the cost management tool, which is Power BI, is your client will not allow you to install Power BI. Maybe they will not allow you to spin up any other services because you want your own report. They won't do it. They won't allow you. Or they might not even allow you to run an API call. They say, hey, we don't know what this API is doing. But you may be able, which that's what I do, be able to give them some scripts, CLI script that generates reports that is understandable for them, or KQL, which I will show it to you today, and tell them, hey, extract the data, save it in a CSV file, and have it on your laptop. So this is the way I did it, and this is the way I was very successful. Basically, I have extracted the information from the resource group on my laptop, the resources, storage, SQL, and so on. And each one of them, I put them in a sheet, which, these are two example. This one, as you can see, is for the storage account, which has the tiers here and the SKU and so on. So how did I do it? Very simple. I have a CLI code, which I will show it to you at the end of this. At the end of this slide, I'm basically, this is a location on my machine, on my laptop, and I extract the data into this CSV file. So number 10 is here, 20 is here, 30 is here, and so on. So you can use this as a sample and expand it, and basically focus on the services that you are interested in. Again, I have 8 hours to prove to my clients I want to save them 5% or $50,000, so I can basically get the contract from them and be able to work on their environment later on. So this is using Azure CLI. Another way is KQL. So KQL is another way that you can extract the resources. So I extract the information for storage account in this SQL server and SQL database. What are the most important things that is always required? You have to understand what you're extracting. For example, you need to know if they're in a public IP or not. Location as in, are they in one country? Are they in different countries? Basically resource groups. extract the SKU name as the tier, the capacity. So my point is, you have to understand the tool that you're working with. I'll give you one example that some people do not know. Azure Data Factory spins up other services. So you have to know what those services are. One of them is IR, integration runtime. Guess what? Integration runtime behind the scenes spins up 4 extra services. One is a load balancer, network security group, public IP, and private IP. So the question is, where are they? How much money they're spending? So these are the things you have to, these are the small things you have to find out. And the best way to extract them, KQL is a good example. Okay, so let's go through the codes. So these are so on my machine, I'm using pay-as-you-go, by the way. On my machine, I have a folder, and this is a folder, and these are basically the same folder on my machine, and I'm extracting to a CSV file all the resources that I'm looking for: blob storage, resources, SQL, and so on, and some other information. To go through a KQL one, this is a KQL one. This is KQL Explorer. By the way, people who don't know what KQL is basically the most important language you should learn in the cloud. So look for Azure Resource Graph Explorer and use these codes within the Explorer, within your portal, or you can use the KQL Explorer. Same thing here. It basically extracts the storage information, the SQL information. I will provide these codes again, the database, and there's some virtual machines and so on and so forth. So I will extract all of this, put it into a CSV file, and start my studying. So how do I do it? Let's see. So this is a good example of the result. And this is my tool. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to open one of them for you to see. Let's pick storage. If I open this, this is not it, sorry. Sorry, not storage. Resources. I had to delete the storage because it had confidential information. So this is my storage. This is my resources. So it gives me the same information that I was extracting through my Azure CLI. So if I go to my resources, these are the resources that I was looking for. The same, all of this you can find in your resources. Okay. So save. So each one of them, basically, I've extracted each one of them. So let's just pick one, resources. And through this, I will understand what type of software the client has, what kind of, how many clients they have, what kind of, where's the location of them. One of the things instantly we found, it's about saving money, is we picked this scenario, we picked this resources, which was one client, and we found out that this client, some of their location are in different countries, which was wrong. They all needed to be in East USA. So just to bring all these information in one space, we would have saved them a lot of money.
Okay, seems like. Okay, Nik, are back?
Yes. Yeah, something is wrong. So where did you guys lose me?
For a second.
For a second. Okay, so it's about saving money. It's about what I did to convince my client real quick that how much money I can save them so I can get the contract. It was about the client did not allow me to, I didn't have the luxury to do whatever I want in their environment because it was production. It's a good example. So by using these CLIs and these KQL, because KQL does not have, there is no insert, delete, update. They were convinced to write these, run these codes and give me the results of them. So through that, I was able to generate this Excel file and give them a feedback. So one of the two things here, one thing it was, we found out this resource group was for one specific client, and this client was all in East USA. And by mistake, they had two services in Central Canada, which was way more expensive than the one that they had in US. Okay, there you go. Instantly, I saved them some money. How much? I don't remember in this scenario. The other thing is, some of them that were coupled. So let's say these were development, these were, I don't know, UAT, and this was production. So we were telling them for development, why are you using a premium tier? And they didn't know it. In this case, I don't have the right data here, but just imagine I have 3 premium tier, and there are one for dev, one for UAT, and for prod. And they didn't have the right answer. They said, we don't know. I'm like, okay, so that's money. So this is another way. So within one simple Excel and a couple of KQL and CLI script, I was able to convince my client and teach him how they can basically save. And I think we saved them something around instantly. We showed them that they can save like 5 to 10% instantly. It was a long list, by the way. This is not the list. We had to delete lots of information here because they were kind of confidential. So we renamed everything just for demo purposes. And by the way, we got a permission from the client that we can get these and rename them. So back to the slide. So up to this point, I showed you that how the Microsoft did it, how they're collecting your information, how they're evaluating your environment, and how I was able to do it using CLI and KQL. Now, let's go through the real scenario that really happened. So this information that you see on the left was the information that we collected and put in our Excel file. The client had, I don't know, something around 40 to 60, something like that, AppservicePlan, and they were growing every week. It was just growing. And with one simple look, we found out one of the services that they have down here were not even used. So we just saved them instantly $150. They were not even using it. So some of these savings you can visualize, instantly find out. So it will help a lot. But you need to have the right KQL or CLI, put them in an Excel, get your own checklist, basically. The most important thing is you have to understand how that service works. So this service, AppservicePlan, was doing the right thing. So as you can see on the right here, the service plan was scaling in and out very well, 80% when the number of CPU usage was high, and 60%. But we found out again, the client had 3 environments. Each client had 3 environments or 3 resource group. But the biggest problem was they were all using the same subscription. If you can see here, P1, P2, and P3. So guess what? They were using P2, a tier, an expensive tier for development. And we showed them this screenshot and we said, hey, instead of you using P2, first of all, you can use P1, which was not a big deal. But the most important thing is we asked them, hey, why don't you use a dev test? So if you remember, while we were going through the presentation, I just want to show it to you so you kind of, if you remember, I asked, what is this dev test? So the dev test is basically, hopefully, it's an Azure Dev Test Lab. It's a cheaper environment. It's for development. So the client was not in a development environment, and they were using tiers that was not designed for development. Even the cheapest tier you go, it's more expensive than the development, the Azure Dev Test Labs. So you have to move your development to a different subscription within your tenant. Okay, so That was a big savior. So how much they saved? I think moving to the dev test lab, it's about 40% save just for developing something, 40% money, okay? And this what happened at the end. They had over 1,300 servers, and every week they were just growing. Every week, the cost went down by 40%. We show them that they can join, as I just showed you a few seconds ago. They can do their development in a place called Dev Test Labs, which has a less SLA, but it's 40% cheaper. 40% cheaper than any other environment that they're using. There are tiers that they can use from 1,500 down to only $10. So that's around 150 times, 160 times saving in money. We're just talking about development. Just imagine you have to go deeper than that. So one of the things that they did not have between this 1,300 services is they did not tag their services. In cloud, whenever you're spinning up a service, there's an option called tag. All of the services have it. No one uses it, unfortunately. Guess what? It's very critical. First of all, it's basically a Azure slash standard in software engineering. Second of all, it's an environment with all of these tools, Azure Advisor, all the security tools. They go and check your tags to understand what kind of environment it is. A good example is it dev? Is it UAT? Is it prod? If you don't mention that in the tag, you will not get basically a good review. Okay, so make sure you fix all your tags tomorrow morning. And another thing that we did was, this is my last slide. Another thing we did was we tried to find the services that were underutilized. So as you can see in this scenario, the client was using a service that was using maximum 2% of its capacity. And we found out that the client could even, first of all, go from a tier P1 to a cheaper tier. They could have done that, which they didn't, which was not a big deal. But they could have completely deleted this service and applied the logic of this service in another service. I'll give you one example, okay? So let's assume you have Azure Data Factory and Azure Logic App. Both of them, they can go to an environment like a blob storage and delete a folder. Well, the question is, why do you need two services to do something very basic? Could you combine them together? The answer is yes, you can combine them together. But a client was using two different services and they were double paying just to do some basic stuff. So this is where you have to understand and dig into your architecting design and see, can you replace these services by other services? Some of them you can, they're too complicated, but some of them, if you have the knowledge, an example that I just gave you is Logic App and Azure Data Factory. Could you do that? Could you tell the client to change it? It will be time consuming. They need lots of testing, but this is how you optimize basically your environment using Azure Well-Architected Framework. Okay, and that's it. I'm done.
Thank you so much, Nik. Anyone have any question?
Sure, I have one, and very good work. Impressive, Nikkhah. The Azure Cost Management tool, is that just some service you have to pay, or it's come along with the subscription?
It comes with a subscription. As far as I know, you don't need to pay for it.
Okay, that's cool.
It may. Let me just here. I just want to show it to you. It may save, because this is you're saving, right? It may use a blob storage behind the scene that you might need, which it will not use a hot storage, of course. It might be peanuts, but it's just a logging report. So I'm not gonna say I'm gonna say no because I haven't seen it, but you are using a service, so you will be paying peanuts, or it will piggyback from one of your storage.
Okay.
Okay, but
Yeah,
so
that's fine.
I'll check it. That's a good question. I've never thought about it.
Yeah.
But,
then with the advisor, what kind of permission do you need in order to run that advisor? It seems going everywhere.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So if you remember, one of the things I told you in my one of the here, I had minimum environmental access. So basically, you can see my screen, correct?
Right.
Okay. So basically, the client on day one told me, "Hey, no, you can't do anything." I'm like, then how could I work? Then how can I evaluate? And then they said, "What do you need?" I said, "I need read-only for all of your environment." So you need a read-only for all of your environment. But again, the client doesn't like to do that. The reason is you're in their production, they're protective. A good example is bank or companies who has over 1,000 servers. They're not going to risk. They don't know who you are. Even if you're from Microsoft, they will be protective. They will push back. So yes, you need read access for everything.
Okay. At
But
tenant level,
sorry,
or at the tenant level, or at the subscription level, the read access.
you need at least subscription. Yes, you need subscription.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe tenants, when it comes to security, just came to my mind. Maybe the security might need some tenant, but I'm not sure. It just came to my mind. But I will check that as well too. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, but the best way, you know, I know you're asking these questions because of the service. The best way is to pick a service, let's say SQL Server, let's say Azure Data Factory. Pick one of these services, run those KQL or blob storage, run those KQL on or CLI that on basically on do I have this storage? Run this, put it in an Excel file. Let's say you've got 50 blob storage. Save it in an Excel file, start maneuvering up and down, evaluate the kind of tier, the kind of SKU, and categorize them into dev, UAT, and prod. So the biggest weakness I've seen in every company, no one uses the tag, not even once. And I'm like, guys, you need to use this. And this is how we, this client was the interesting was, we asked them, is this one of the services that we asked them, is this dev or UAT? They didn't know. They called the client and said, hey, which environment is this? And we're just like, no, you should know this. You shouldn't go and ask them. They should be asking you. So yeah, through the tagging system, trust me, all these tools or that Microsoft designs or maybe third party, they go under the skin of your environment, check the logs and check the tags and basically give you a nice report, whatever it is. Another one is the Power BI that I mentioned. So that's another good one that I don't know, did I show it here? Well, I think I did. I think, yeah, it was here. Cost management within Power BI. So this is Power BI desktop. I think you can go and download it and basically or set it up into your Power BI environment. And this was another problem that the client says, no Power BI in my environment. You're not allowed to do that. So you have to find ways to convince your client, whether through Microsoft tools or your personal tools. So I prefer to do it through Excel because I'm dealing with managers and they're instantly convinced seeing in Excel, but showing them the portal with thousands of services, they don't understand, they don't get it. And they don't need to, they're not technical, they have a different job, okay? But that's how I was successful.
Nik, I have a
Yes.
question here. So all the links, very important actually, links are sometimes hard to find. So you're going to provide all the links with the resources? Okay.
Yeah. As I had mentioned last night, I was double checking all the links, and here they changed it, and I just said, oh, they changed everything. So I put it down here, but I will provide you all the links. I'll put it somewhere at the end here. Put it somewhere at the end here so everyone knows what it is. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Definitely. And by the way, even the scripts, I do that. So one thing I missed to say is, when do you do this? You do this before you development, after development, during development, or in production. Guess what? You have to do it all the time, 24 hours. You have to do it constantly for your dev. The reason is you have to understand how your dev environment is going crazy, how they're growing. When I mean growing, they're adding services as time goes by, right? You're bringing different teams to do different work. So before you bring the development work to production or UAT and evaluate the security, evaluate the usage, you have to do this way in advance. And what I do is this is one of the codes so this spins up a service plan, basically, app service plan. So you might have, let me just show it to you. This is service plan create. So you might have SQL, you might have Data Factory, you might have Logic App. So what I do is I bring the plans, I copy the plans, and I put them here, and I try to understand. The reason is, if you go back and forward, you will miss it. I will put all the information in my script. I'm going to provide this script for you that has the costs that I'm looking for, and how I spin up a service. And by the way, you can, remove this and put Data Factory, or remove, you can put whatever you want here. You just make sure you put the right parameters up here, of course. Okay, put the right SKU or subscription and so on. So whenever you're writing your script, this is CLI that will spin up an app service plan. Make sure you have the financial, tier up there so you know what you're doing. And basically, this is the SKU. And make sure you put the tags here. So the tags are missing here. I should put the tags here as well. You can put the tags here, by the way. Okay. What else?
Any other question from anyone?
Okay, I'm going to ask another one if no one else.
Go ahead, John.
So you already introduced the cost optimization.
Yes.
And also you present what you are doing. Is your part is complementary? What's the cost optimization process result, or is more enhanced based on that?
So if you mean the codes, or can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Because if you run the advisor, right?
Yes.
If you choose the cost optimization,
Yeah.
I assume that one will give you some recommendations on how you may reduce the cost.
Yes.
You also run your customized tools, also reducing the cost.
Yes.
My question would be, is yours complementary what's that advisor does, or you are doing something totally different from the cost optimizer?
Well, okay, I get your point. So as I had explained, the problem with the advisor is the tool is not mature enough for me to basically run it at the client side. That's number one. Number two, it has so many options, and I'm like, should I select this or not? Like, so I cannot make a fool out of myself in front of the client. Like, and by the way, again, I only have 1 day to nail it. And what is the best way? And not only you need to run the cost optimization, if you have the luxury, you have to create an Excel file to convince a manager. So what I'm doing Yes, I am using the same API, or I'm piggybacking from Microsoft Advisor. I go and check Advisor and I say, oh, there's an option called XYZ, and it's very critical, and I don't have the CLI for it. I go and find the CLI and put it in my Excel file, for example. Okay?
Sure. Okay, now I understood.
Yeah. At once I get the luxury and they trust me and I get to the system, they say, okay, Nick, we gonna give you a couple of resources that are currently we're developing, again, not production. We want you to evaluate while our team are working, and then I use the cost advisor, then I use other tools that Microsoft has. And by the way, one last thing, the good thing you mentioned is I here. So some other tools like Azure Migrate tool. If you know what Azure Migrate tool is, it's a tool that basically goes on on-prem and does a lift and shift to the cloud. Guess what? This tool does a pre-assessment on cost optimization. What I'm trying to say is there are tools out there from Microsoft and maybe third parties that give you basically a pre-assessment from a cost perspective. You might say, hey, Nick, is there a pre-assessment from a security perspective? I'm sure there is. I'm not a security guy, but I'm sure definitely it is. For example, you're bringing your AD from on-prem to the cloud. It's a good example. I'm sure there is. And by the way, I should go and find this. That's a good thing came to my mind right now. So there are other tools that will help you to do your either pre-assessment or basically it does an assessment for you with what you have. Okay.
Yeah.
What else? Nice. What else?
Nick.
Yes.
Do you think is it okay to switch on your video just for taking one picture for social media post?
Oh my God.
If it is okay, I'm not,
No, I'm an old man. No one likes to see my face, but let me just move everything. Nice. Let me just unplug this. Give me a second. Sorry about that. You can see. Let me just. There's too much light on this side. Let me stand here. So yeah, can you see me now?
Yeah, and can you please take off your share screen with this, at least this one, maybe something else you can put so I can take picture, because now we can see yourself in the share screen.
All right, let me just, I cannot see anything. What should I do?
Just take anything, any like PowerPoint. Probably you can share the PowerPoint presentation slide.
Let me just, this might be good here.
Okay, because I can see, but anyway, no, I can do that. Let's because I think you have some issue there.
Is that okay? I cannot see you, by the way.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine. So.
Did you capture it?
Yeah, I'm just, give me a second. Give me 1 second. Just capture a picture. Yeah, now I think it's good. You're good now. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah. So if I want to just say my last word is two things: tag all your services and definitely use Azure Dev Test Labs. So these are the two things I would tell everyone to follow, and trust me, it will make a big difference the way you're thinking about cloud technology and specifically design. And go through the documentation from Microsoft, which I will provide. And that's about it. Nothing else.
Yep. Nick, thank you so much. It is really great learning, especially nowadays, whoever work, it's not like old days. Even if as a developer, data engineer, whatever, you need to know the cost. I mean, people on really like top management or whoever in the top, they will rely on you to really find out the cost. So in that case, everyone should know a bit about the how to save the cost. This like awesome session, and thank you so much, everyone.
Just one thing I want to say is we never ask our developers how much money you're spending. We never tell our team lead how much money. Even developers should learn how much money they're spending every day. They should be asking this. The reason is it's like giving your credit card to someone. They should come and tell how much did I spend yesterday. You know, there are services that you run like BigQuery. You just write one select statement and boom, $1,000. A simple select. So developers should change the way they are working and developing and designing. Okay, and one of them is using well-architected frameworks, specifically the cost optimization. And Paul, can I ask one thing?
Yeah, sure.
We've only got 6 people, 7 people here. Is there anything they want from a presentation next time?
Well, sure. I'll send the survey and ask for
okay.
what it is. That'd be great. Yeah. But thank you so much, Nik. It was
Thank
great
you
having you
very
in
much.
our session.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, and have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.